Hey ghosts and ghouls. Today I wanted to talk about the topic of if I ever presented Femme in class, like in school. So someone had asked me this. I wasn't sure if they meant like high school or college. So I figured I'd make this video cover three parts. So the first part will be high school. The second part will be community college. And the third part will be university. So in high school, I definitely did not present femininely at all, like not even a little bit. Now that's not to say that I didn't want to, but I just didn't. I had a lot of stuff to sort out in my mind, and things were a lot different back then. So back then, there was a lot of like myths and stereotypes about trans women and crossdressers. And yeah, a lot of these things still exist today, but trust me, like 20 years ago, they were a lot worse. And 10 or 20 years, the generation that came before me, I'm sure it was even worse for them. So, like, this is going back 20 years. So, like, it was pretty terrible. So, like, when I was like 14, 15, if I was like to Google, for example, like, what is transgender? The resources that would pop up are not the same as the ones that are today. So, like, if you think like gatekeeping is bad today, it was worse when I was younger. And, I'm sure, like I was saying before, like, it was much worse for the people that came before me, but I can only really speak of my experiences, right? So back then, when I would Google stuff like this, it would come back with like stuff like, "Oh, you can't be a trans woman if you're interested in women. Trans women are solely interested in men. You're not really a trans woman. You're just a cross-dresser if you're interested in women." And sure, these lies still exist today, and people will use them to validate themselves, even if it comes at the cost of invalidating others. But like it was just so much worse. And the same thing goes with like not even just sites ran by like trans people, but even like therapists and stuff. Like the information was just terrible. Like it was almost kind of like, oh, if you didn't play with Barbie dolls, you weren't really transgender. And like to a 13 or 14-year old, it's pretty confusing. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not transgender, or then it's so that information was just terrible. Now, that's not to say that good information didn't exist, but like as a teenager in the Wild West days of the internet, like you didn't know where to find that stuff. Mix that in with like the negative portrayal of trans women and cross-dressers and just feminine men, anyone androgynous, like in the media, in movies, like it was mostly like negative representation, right? So like it caused me to have like a lot of like internalized thoughts, a lot of confusion. So like it took me like a while to kind of like work these things out. And in my town, like there wasn't many LGBT people out at that time. Well, back then, like they called it the LGBT. Now they added like the Q and the A and the I, and that's good because like like I'm queer myself, so like it's important to have those letters. But yeah, back then, not many people were out at all. I remember in my high school, the amount of open trans people that I'm aware of was zero, not just in my grade, just in my high school in general. There was one guy in my high school that wore makeup, but he didn't like wear it to like be pretty or feminine or present femininely. Like he wore it more for like shock value, which like isn't like the same thing. So back then I would try to be more masculine than I actually was. And I was also like very like punk rock. I'd have like dyed hair that was spiked in every direction and the leather jacket. So it was definitely kind of like a tougher exterior that I put on. And I guess like a big part of it stemmed from like, childhood because like when I was younger, I was a little bit like kind of feminine and I was kind of like read, I guess, as like queer, being like 11, 12. And other kids kind of bred me as that, and it's definitely wasn't rewarded back then. Not that it would be these days. There's still like a lot of homophobia and transphobia and stuff, but what I'm getting at though is like it kind of puts like a target on your back. So what do? You pretend to be masculine because it's like a survival mechanism, right? A lot has like changed in like the last like 20 years since then. But like that doesn't mean that things are like good or great. Like I personally feel like there is still like a lot that needs to be done, right? Like I feel like in a lot of areas, trans kids, queer kids, just feminine men, like they're just not accepted fully. Like in some areas, sometimes in like select case by case scenario in some schools, it seems like they are, and things are a lot better. There's a lot more resources, a lot more like therapists and stuff on their side, but turn on the news, you can easily tell there is a lot more work to be done. So I didn't go to college at 18. I actually ended up dropping out of high school and getting my GED. And then, like a few years later, I ended up going to college. So, there was like a few year intermission before I ended up going to community college. And like what's so great about college is like in a lot of ways, and for most people, it's kind of like a fresh start. So like you get to start over and kind of like, it's like a do-over of high school. Everyone's more mature in some ways and immature in others, but like it's a fresh start, and for like I feel like a lot of people like that fresh start is really needed. So when I got to college, I started doing more feminine things. I remember like the first thing I did was I painted my nails. I painted them black because like a lot of times like guys can get away with like black nails. So kind of like the whole rock star look. So I started doing that, and then like a few months later, I started wearing black eyeliner. Even when I present as a woman, I still love black eyeliner. I just love black eyeliner, but it's another thing that like androgynous men can get away with because like like you have that whole like rock star look, and like it's not fully accepted, but it's like more accepted. So I started wearing the nail polish and the eyeliner, and I remember like when I first started doing those things, like I had so much anxiety about them. And it's like, whoa, like even though like other people do it, like have that androgynous style, like it was just like so like, oh my God, like I can't believe that I'm doing this. I know like some people wouldn't look at this as like a big deal of wearing eyeliner and nail polish, but like to me it was like a really big deal back then. Then I started like incorporating other stuff. I remember after that I started using foundation, and the foundation was like so off in terms of color. I actually don't even think I had foundation. I think I might have just used concealer first. So sometimes these things take a little trying and learning, especially for like trans feminine people and cross dressers. Like you're not born with this knowledge. A lot of times you might not be around like women to learn it. So like you have to kind of learn these things on your own. And back then, YouTube was only like a couple years old. So like there wasn't really makeup tutorials all over YouTube like there are like now. It's like there's probably thousands being uploaded every day. But back then, no, like YouTube videos were just like oranges yelling at you. Like it was just like ridiculous kind of like meme stuff. After that, I started wearing eyeshadow and women's clothing as well, but not like dresses, skirts, bras, or anything like that. It was more like just like pants and like shirts or sweatshirts. So like it was more like an androgynous style. So like I didn't have any like chest padding or anything like that. So like I could just look like a very like pretty boy. Or like maybe from a distance, people couldn't really tell what kind of gender I was trying to present as. Um, Now, I absolutely love like an androgynous kind of femme look on occasion, but like mostly I just like to be femme most of the time. But like it's cool to switch it up. Like I love androgyny. So like despite like presenting femme in college, like kind of androgynous femme, like actually dating wasn't like too bad. I always had this like fear like, oh, if I start presenting femininely, like nobody would be interested in me, right? Like I feel like that's like such a common fear. But like there was like 10 times the amount of people interested in me. I was like so taken back by that because I was like expecting like people to be like, oh, I'm gonna avoid them, and like so many people were interested. I was like, what? Around this time, like I did start presenting as a woman on occasion, like outside of college, but I never did it at college. And this is around the time that I also like made my first trans friend and also like my first agender friend. But like back then, they didn't use the word agender. Neither of us even knew of its existence at that time. So like, we both like just called ourselves androgynous at the time. Like that was like the language we used. But those are stories for another day that I might get into. So then I ended up finishing my associates in math and science, and I transferred to a 4-year school. It was a really good school, but it was really annoying to get to. It was an hour and a half commute each day. I don't know why I decided to do that, but at the time it seemed like a good idea because I was trying to save money by not dorming. When I went to this university, I was still presenting androgynous pretty open. I remember one day, one of the turning points was that after class, a girl had came up to me and she was like, "Hey, like, if you're interested, there's an LGBTQ club on campus." So I ended up checking out the club and ended up kind of finding like a family there, like a new group of friends. And luckily, they were all kind of like patient and understanding because I had a lot to learn. But then again, like, like I was saying, going back, resources online weren't necessarily the best. You couldn't really hop on YouTube and find like awesome videos explaining trans issues. It was the wild west of the internet. It's getting tamer and tamer as time goes on. So I did end up presenting as a woman fully on campus. Now I didn't do this like every day. I do it like maybe like 1 or 2 days a week. 'Cause it takes a lot of time to get ready, and I had to take the train there and back. It was just, it was kind of hassle getting ready. But like I did present as a woman on occasion, and like a big part of it is like having that like support network because like I had like friends on campus that were like super open-minded and supportive. And I think like college is just like such a great atmosphere for that, like to explore your identity. I never told anyone which pronouns to use. Like looking back, like if I could do it again, I probably would have like told people to refer to me as like she, her, or like like as a woman. But like what's done is done. I also wish I kind of like went to graduation presenting as a woman. Like I ended up actually not even going to graduation at all. Like even though I did graduate, I just didn't show up for like the ceremony. Presenting as a woman on campus did run me into some like unique situations. So like one of my professors, like I went to the class like every day for like weeks, probably like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, presenting as a woman because it was only like 2 days a week or whatever. And then one day I showed up presenting as a guy, and when I showed up presenting as a guy, the professor was like, "Where have you been? You haven't been here in a while," and was like giving me a hard time. And it's like, I have never missed a class. So like they didn't even realize I was the same person. Hashtag gender fluid problems. Oddly, years again, I find myself actually back in classes again. I love learning, which is like most people probably wouldn't expect, especially if they met me 20 years ago. Because, like I said, like I dropped out of high school, so it's like, now I'm in my 30s and I'm like still taking classes. But in this school, trying something new, something I never did before on a campus, a fem name. But, I don't really have much detail on that yet. We'll see how that works out in the future. Maybe I'll talk more about that at a later time. But like it's a pretty progressive and open-minded school, so like that's pretty cool. Well, I should probably end this video before it ends up being like 200 hours long. But if you would like to, share your experiences on like, whether you've ever presented femininely or just like rather even in, if you're not trans feminine or, male to female crossdresser, even if you're something else like a trans man or something, like share your experiences if you want to, if you presented how you wanted to in school or college. Maybe even work. Maybe I'll make another video on this topic, like relating to work. But yeah, so yeah, feel free to share your experiences, and if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. I try to put up a video every week. Pretty busy with like school and work and everything, but I try to put one up a week. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.